Starfield got its first major update this past week, which of course broke a bunch of mods, including the Starfield script extender. Now thankfully, this is updated almost immediately, but if you did download that version, you may have noticed a warning upon download. This wasn't random, as it seems like the mod was packaged improperly and a new version has now been posted, so hey, maybe worth another update if you haven't. And on top of that, the DLSS 3.0 frame generation mod was also updated. And with that update, we even got some improvements, so future Starfield updates should not break this mod as often. But if you are using an upscaler, whether it be the inbuilt one or a mod for Starfield, you definitely need to download the Upscaling Fix. There's a bug in Starfield right now where negative map bias was never set, leading to some foliage having slightly blurrier textures than they should. This mod fixes that, and it's a great one to just keep in the background regardless of which upscaler you're using, whether that be DLSS thanks to mods or even the vanilla FSR. But one of the other major themes to pop up in Starfield modding as of late is fixing a bunch of those issues that Bethesda just said they're going to be fixing with future updates. Because yeah, modders are getting there already. Hold to Equip Extended allows you to eat food found in the world without picking it up. Literally the exact feature Bethesda just said they're going to be adding. And this is genuinely handy, as now instead of ignoring a lot of the random food items in the game, I'll just immediately eat them and avoid any inventory annoyance or management. Another incredibly handy mod is Billboard Map. So now, scattered around New Atlantis, and notably next to some of the train stops, you'll find a full-scale map with location labels and even a key. Very similar to the types of maps you could find in malls, and let me tell you, this is legitimately useful. Bethesda has said that regular maps may come at some point down the line, but until then, this is a great holdover mod. And although modders haven't added in full-on vehicles just yet, the next best thing is Horizontal Boost Tweak. This mod will overhaul how far boost packs can push you horizontally, so you can cover some fairly extreme distances with your boost pack now. The mod itself is very simple. It basically just allows you to boost how much boost you get when you're moving horizontally. This based off the boost pack remapping trick, so hitting the space key will typically just make you shoot up into the sky, but hitting a second bound hotkey like Alt will propel you forward. With this mod, there'll be a few options as far as how much of a boost you want your boost pack to get, but it truly is one of the best vehicle-esque options you have right now. You can legitimately cover great distances with your boost pack when using this mod. Link Lodge Workbenches is a mod that will make the basement lodge chest with unlimited storage actually connect to your crafting tables. And there's an optional file to also apply this to the bedroom safe. And honestly, it's just incredibly handy, albeit a bit cheaty. This chest in the lodge basement always has unlimited storage, but typically doesn't actually connect to your workbenches, making it minimally useful. But now you could just make this your permanent space for storing all of your junk, giving it incredible value. But if you're using that, you should also grab Ultra Anim, which will get rid of these obnoxiously long animations that play when entering and exiting crafting tables. So now with this mod installed, entry and exit will be instant. And this will even extend to other interactables, so now sitting and standing animations overall are going to be much more sped up. And although it does look silly after playing this game for 100 hours, which I'm sure most of you will eventually get to, I personally much prefer it looking silly but being quick as opposed to just taking way too long. But have you ever noticed in Starfield how NPCs just kind of stare at you? It's not like a casual glance, but a full-on death stare from randoms around you. And sometimes it's even multiple NPCs at once, which can really harm immersion. Well, the aptly named mod Stop Staring at Me will make it so NPCs in Starfield stare at you significantly less. Now, a lot of the time, you'll get a brief glance and then the NPCs will return to whatever they were doing previously, or even NPCs will walk by and not look at you at all. But if you are looking for a more dramatic change up on gameplay, the Deadly Difficulty mod is for you. This will dramatically lower the time to kill in Starfield by increasing your damage dealt, but also your damage received. So all of a sudden, that random pirate can now absolutely obliterate your HP with just a few shots. You need to be more conscious of your surroundings in combat and really use cover more to focus down enemies. But this mod also has the very nice effect of all weapons being somewhat viable, and bullet sponges are almost completely removed from the game. Playing with something like this installed is going to be very particular. You'll either love the experience or hate how quick everything can unfold. But I personally really like this one, as I think it makes the combat loop in Starfield more enjoyable, as now nearly all of the enemies are a genuine threat to you. If you want to enhance this even further, improved combat AI is another essential mod to download right now. Sometimes you'll notice in vanilla Starfield, a lot of enemies just kind of stand in front of you. It's almost like they don't even care about their own well-being and just stick themselves out just to be near you. Well, improved combat AI is a huge overhaul here. You'll notice enemies sticking to and more consistently using cover in Starfield. You'll look out for targets and find almost every single enemy standing behind cover of some kind. Even further, enemies are way more aggressive. In vanilla Starfield, it almost feels like enemies have this movie-like mechanic where only a couple of enemies can fire at you at any given time. But with this mod, the floodgates are open. You'll notice barrages coming your way as all of the enemies focus fire your position, and even more impactful, they'll use grenades a bit more often. This mod definitely makes combat more fun and definitely ups the difficulty, and I think using it with immersive damage makes the combat overall in Starfield just more action-packed and enjoyable. Immersive damage doesn't make the game that much more difficult as it lowers the time to kill for both you and enemies. But improved combat AI definitely makes Starfield a more difficult experience, as enemies now just feel a bit smarter and definitely more aggressive. But now the combat is a bit harder, maybe you want to boost up your own chances. Well, then you should download better out of line of sight sneaking. Enemies in Starfield are shockingly good at detecting you even when you're out of their line of sight. It's like they have supersonic hearing and can detect you even if you have a giant object dividing you. This mod will significantly reduce that, so now, based off sound alone, enemies will be less accurate in detecting you, and sneaking behind walls becomes far more viable. But do you enjoy scanning in Starfield? Some people do, but I think the vast majority just find this whole process to be a bit tedious. But instant scan will dramatically increase your enjoyment with this mechanic. There are two files here, so you can have it so things will become fully scanned after just scanning one example of that entity. Typically it takes around 10 scans to fully scan a creature or fauna, although with just one scan, at points things did feel a bit too easy. So my personal favorite is the 3 scan option with this mod. You need to scan something 3 different times in order to get it fully scanned, dramatically reducing the tedium required to fully scan a planet. Although for a single player RPG, Starfield does have a surprising number of things you just have zero control over. And in one example, the mod Legendary Modifications will give you the ability to manually edit which legendary effects are on your weapons and armor. This isn't free, there's going to be a cost associated with editing the effects, and it's going to get more expensive as you go from tier 1 to 2 or 3, but compared to how overpowered you can make some weapons, this cost is basically non-existent. So this is definitely a cheaty mod, but at the same time, you could just create some incredibly fun legendary combinations here, as well as avoid RNG completely when it comes to some of the drops in Starfield. I honestly think this mod would be way better if you just made it far more expensive to edit effects on weapons. Lock it behind some perks as well as a bunch of research, and then make the actual material cost quite a bit higher. Either way, if you do want a bit more control over your character build and maybe breaking the balance just a little bit, this is definitely the mod for you. Better Food and Chems is a brand new mod that will be huge for some of you. This will make it so food, drinks, and chems will last twice as long, but most importantly to me, food items will heal you for 5 times as much HP. This is huge as it makes food a genuinely viable build in Starfield, as typically the amount food heals you just isn't nearly enough to make it meaningful. But now in combat with some good food items, you can immediately heal up, because food does have the unique mechanic of instantly healing you as opposed to healing items healing you over time. The duration bonus is just a really nice added effect, having some of those bonuses last twice as long, but overall I feel like this mod isn't even necessarily overpowered, it just opens up an additional build path in Starfield. But if you're sick of having to game vendors to get more resources, Perk Up is the mod for you. This will increase the number of credits and resources vendors have for sale in Starfield. So now you're going to have tens of thousands of credits available at various vendors as opposed to just 5,000 at the vast majority of them. And honestly, I feel like mods like this are really great additions to Starfield because this is all technically possible in the game by default. Simply wait 48 hours and vendors would reset anyway. So all this mod's really doing is cutting out some incredibly tedious sleep cycles where you have to wait a bunch of time. And if you are diving into spaceships in Starfield, there are a few new mods that I highly recommend you download. Flight Control's Auto Align will make it so after you stop moving the flight direction, it'll automatically recenter itself. So you can see here, after doing a turn or a maneuver, my flight controls will immediately recenter. This makes space combat feel a lot nicer on PC, rather than the flight direction just being wherever you left your mouse. Now, a lot of times you'll return to your controls to find them back in the neutral position as you're trying to manage power management, combat, as well as maneuvering. But speaking of power management, if you're finding that a bit cumbersome to deal with, slow motion during ship power management is a great mod for you. With this mod, as soon as you start modifying your ship's power, time in game will start to slow down, giving you a few additional moments to think and actually adapt to whatever combat encounter you're in. This is particularly handy in the mid to late game, where you do have a lot of power to distribute to various systems. And if you find yourself constantly getting overwhelmed in ship combat, I think this is a great mod to simplify things a bit. But then there's also Ship Skip, which will allow you to skip the docking cutscenes in Starfield. So now instead you can immediately board a ship after clicking dock, and even further, you could watch these ships physically line up instead of having this cutscene play. But we are of course also getting into some of those Star Wars mods. Before the release of Starfield, there was so much speculation that there'd be a ton of Star Wars mods for this game, and we're finally getting some, such as some replacer mods. We have this one, which is going to be a retexture of either the Starborn or Mantis armor to either look like one of the Fets or the Mandalorian, and you could even get a cape if you want one. This mod's particularly cool as you could use this as a visual replacer for the Mantis armor, which is typically quite ugly, and while full-on custom armors are still a ways away, retexturing or replacing some of the one-off unique armors in-game is definitely a good way to start adding some more custom content. But if you want something a bit more far-reaching, there's also the Galactic Civil War conversion, which will retexture the United Colony security uniform to be a Stormtrooper uniform. So now you will basically find Stormtroopers patrolling around all of New Atlantis, which is honestly hilarious. Currently the mod's super simple, it's just going to be a retexture mod and that's it, but I feel like it's a great example of what kinds of crazy Star Wars overhauls are inevitably coming in the future. But if you enjoyed this video and you're diving into modding Starfield, check out this one as well, as I go over a bunch of other content edition mods that came out a little while ago.